There is a mound in southern Iraq, roughly 20 kilometers southwest of the ancient city of Ur, that most people have never heard of. It has no dramatic skyline, no ruins breaking the surface in a way that catches the eye. From a distance, it looks like the land simply rose, as land does in flat desert, in a long, low shape that could be mistaken for a natural formation. It is called Abu Shahrain, and underneath it sits what archaeologists have formally identified as the oldest city ever built on Earth. Not one of the oldest, the oldest. Eridu. The Sumerians were unambiguous about what this place was. Their king lists one of the most important documents to survive from the ancient world, begins with a single sentence that has been translated and retranslated for over a century. After the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu, not Babylon, not Ur, not Uruk, Eridu. This was, in the Sumerian account of human history, the place where civilization started, the first city. The original point. Modern archaeology has, remarkably, confirmed that assessment. The site was first excavated seriously in the 1940s and 1950s by a team of Iraqi archaeologists working under the supervision of the Iraq Directorate General of Antiquities. What they found, as they dug downward through the accumulated layers of occupation, was a sequence of habitation that went deeper than almost anything else ever found in the region. 18 distinct layers, each one representing a period of construction, destruction, and rebuilding, stretching back continuously from roughly 2500 BC all the way to approximately 5400 BC. 5,400 years before Christ. That is when the first people built the first permanent structures on the mound that would become Eridu. By any calculation, that makes this site the oldest continuously occupied urban location in recorded human history. The excavation reached the 14th layer, and then it stopped. The official explanation has always been funding and logistics. The site is remote. The lower layers are difficult to access. The work is expensive. Excavating ancient Mesopotamia requires resources that Iraqi archaeology has not consistently had. All of that is true. But the timing and the nature of what had already been found in those 14 layers raises questions that the official explanation does not fully answer. Because what the excavation uncovered, even stopping where it did, was not what anyone had expected to find. At the deepest excavated level, layer 14, the earliest layer reached by the team, the archaeologists found a temple, not a primitive shelter, not a fire pit surrounded by bones. A constructed religious building, carefully oriented, built with mud brick, containing an altar and what appeared to be a system for ritual offerings. Around the altar, covering the floor in dense deposits that had accumulated over generations, were fish bones, thousands of fish bones. Fish are not native to the desert. The region around Eridu is now dry, flat land. But in 5400 BC, it was different. The site sat at the edge of a marshy delta, where the rivers met the Persian Gulf in a landscape of reeds and shallow water. The fish were offerings, gifts to the god who, in Sumerian theology, lived in this exact place. His name was Enki. Enki is one of the most important figures in all of Sumerian religious thought. He is the god of wisdom, of fresh water, of craft and creation. He is the keeper of the me, the divine laws that govern civilization, the rules that make organized human life possible. In the Sumerian creation accounts, it is Enki who shapes humanity, Enki who warns the first man before the flood, Enki who provides the knowledge necessary to build and to survive. He is, in the Sumerian worldview, the source of everything that separates organized human society from animal existence. And his home, the place where he was said to dwell, was Eridu. Specifically, the Sumerians located Enki's residence in a place called the Abzu, an underground freshwater realm beneath the city, accessible through the temple, where wisdom was stored and from which it could be drawn. The Abzu is described in Sumerian texts not as a metaphor, but as a physical location, a place that existed under the mound, under the temple, under the layers of accumulated occupation that the excavation was, layer by layer, approaching. The excavation stopped at layer 14. 4 layers remain beneath that. 4 layers that no archaeologist has reached and documented. 4 layers that sit, at this moment, sealed under the desert of southern Iraq, undisturbed, since they were last occupied sometime around or before 5400 BC. The question of what is in those 4 layers is not idle speculation. It is a legitimate archaeological question that the field has not answered. There are reasons to think the answer might be significant. The temple sequence found in the excavated layers is itself already extraordinary. From layer to layer, the Iraqi team documented a continuous tradition of temple construction on the same site. Each new structure built directly over the ruins of the previous one, on the same orientation, following the same basic design, across a period of roughly 3,000 years. The same religious tradition, in the same building, in the same location, maintained without interruption for 3 millennia. That kind of continuity does not happen by accident. It suggests that whatever was happening at Eridu was important enough spiritually, politically, practically, that every subsequent population that settled there chose to maintain it exactly as they found it, rather than replace it with something of their own. No other site in the ancient world shows this degree of unbroken religious continuity over this length of time. And the temple at the bottom of the sequence, the structure at layer 14, the oldest one reached, was already sophisticated. The altar, the orientation toward specific celestial points, the accumulation of offerings that spoke to regular, organized ritual practice. This was not a beginning. This was a tradition already in progress when the excavation stopped. What came before it is in those 4 lower layers. Now consider what else the Sumerian texts say about Eridu. In the account called the Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest written narratives ever found, predating the biblical accounts, it parallels by centuries. The city is described not as the product of human ambition or population growth. It is described as a gift, a thing that was brought from above and placed here deliberately. The text uses the same language as the king list. Kingship and civilization descended. They did not rise from the ground up. They came from somewhere else and were established at this specific location. The beings responsible for establishing Eridu are described in Sumerian texts as the Anunnaki, a term that has accumulated considerable cultural baggage in popular interpretation, but which in the original Sumerian context simply referred to the most powerful divine beings in the pantheon, the ones responsible for the fundamental ordering of human civilization. They chose Eridu. They founded it. They installed the first rulers there and gave the first humans the knowledge necessary to govern themselves. This is mythology. It is understood as mythology. But mythology consistently encodes memory. Not literal memory, not precise historical documentation, but a distorted reflection of events real enough that the culture felt compelled to preserve them in narrative form for thousands of years. The question archaeological practice has historically been reluctant to ask is, what real events produced this mythology? What happened at this location, specific enough and important enough that every Sumerian text describing the origin of civilization points here and says this is where it began? The excavation stopped at layer 14. In 2003, when the United States and its coalition partners invaded Iraq, the site of Eridu was not on the list of protected locations. The Iraq Museum in Baghdad received protection. The more famous sites, Ur, Babylon, Nineveh, received varying degrees of attention from coalition forces and cultural preservation organizations. Eridu, sitting in the empty desert southwest of Nasiriyah, received none. What happened to the site in the years between 2003 and the gradual stabilization of the region is imperfectly documented. Satellite imagery from that period shows disturbance at the site consistent with looting activity. The kind of digging that happens when people know something valuable is underground and nobody is watching. The kind of digging that is uncontrolled, undocumented, and irreversible. Anything that was in the accessible upper layers and had not already been removed by formal excavation may no longer be there. The 4 lower layers are deeper. They require equipment and organization to reach. Looters, with shovels, do not generally go that far down, which means that whatever lies at the base of Eridu, the oldest occupation levels of the world's first city, the layers that sit beneath the earliest formal excavation point, the physical record of what was here before the temple sequence began, is almost certainly still intact. Sealed, undisturbed, waiting. There has been no systematic excavation of Eridu since the 1950s. The site is formally protected under Iraqi law. Access requires government permits and international archaeological coordination. In the current political and security environment of southern Iraq, that coordination is difficult but not impossible. Several international teams have expressed interest in returning to the site. The conversations have been ongoing for years. The actual digging has not resumed. In 2019, a joint Italian-Iraqi team conducted a surface survey of Abu Shahrain using ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry. The results confirmed what the 1950s excavation had suggested. The site extends significantly deeper than the layers already documented. There are structural anomalies in the subsurface regular geometric forms that suggest built environment at depths consistent with the unexcavated layers. The survey was published. The data is available. The excavation has not resumed. Step back and consider what the physical layout of Eridu itself communicates. The mound is not a natural formation. It is the accumulated debris of human occupation, the remains of thousands of years of building, demolition, and rebuilding compressed into a raised landform that now stands several meters above the surrounding desert floor. Every meter of that mound is archaeology. Every layer within it is a moment in time, preserved by the dry climate and the weight of everything built on top of it. The Iraqi team in the 1940s and 1950s was working with the excavation methodology of their era, careful, systematic, but limited by the tools and documentation standards available at the time. Their records are detailed enough to confirm the depth and continuity of the site, but not detailed enough to answer the questions that modern excavation technology could now address. Ground-penetrating radar did not exist. DNA analysis of organic material was decades away. The chemical techniques that can extract environmental data from microscopic soil residue were not available. What the 1950s team left in those 14 excavated layers was a physical record that modern science could reanalyze with tools that did not exist when the original work was done. Some of that reanalysis has happened. The fishbone deposits from the temple floor have been studied. They confirm multiple species, including marine varieties that required transportation from the Gulf Coast. Which means Eridu, even in its earliest excavated phases, was already connected to a supply network, already receiving goods from a distance, already organized enough to maintain a regular flow of specific ritual materials from a source that was not local. That is not the behavior of an isolated village. That is the behavior of a node in a network. And if Eridu was a node in a network in 5400 BC, the date of the earliest layer reached by excavation, the question becomes, what was the network? What were the other nodes, and what was being exchanged? Those questions lead back, inevitably, to the 4 layers beneath the excavation stop point. There is a pattern that repeats throughout the archaeology of ancient Mesopotamia. A site is found, identified, partially excavated, and then, at the point where the finds are becoming most significant, where the deepest and oldest layers are within reach, the work stops. Funding runs out, political circumstances change, permits are not renewed, the team moves on. At Eridu, the pattern is unusually stark. 18 layers documented by geological survey, 14 reached by excavation, 4 remaining. Eridu. And at the bottom of those 4, in a location the Sumerians themselves identified as the founding point of human civilization, something that has not been seen by any archaeologist, ancient or modern, since the last person who knew what was there sealed it under the desert of southern Iraq. The Sumerian king list says kingship descended from heaven and was placed at Eridu. The archaeologists found a temple tradition more ancient and continuous than anything else in the ancient world, still in active use when it was first documented, with no visible beginning point in the excavated record. The Sumerian texts say Enki's wisdom is stored underground, beneath the city, in a place accessible through the temple. The unexcavated layers are underground, beneath the city, beneath the temple sequence. The excavation stopped, and the site sits in the desert, 40 kilometers from the nearest major road, protected by a law and an absence of resources, holding whatever it holds in those 4 remaining layers that no one has reached, and that nobody, in the 7 decades since the last team packed up and left, has been authorized to open. Whatever is at the bottom of Eridu is still there. That much is certain. Everything else is the question.